Did anyone actually believe we would get to this range? People will come in refusing to believe it's conceivable to beat Kingsfall in under half an hour even to this day, but I'm talking if we as a community believed this would be our destination. We have set up hard limits for how Kingsfall would go, and the first was seen when Cruelty stated that a 26 flat is all we can do in Kingsfall before one of the best records came in and thoroughly disproved that. Our next hard limit was set by the polarizing yet undeniably great Atomic, which was neither the outer limit now nor was it at the time. But since we have developed more and more strats and revolutionized the raid through IRB, we are approaching yet another cap, even after just a single record. What else are we supposed to do? What has PlayStation been doing all this while? And who is next in line for the Xbox records? For the most part, Destiny speedrunners last about 2 years at the top of speedrunning if they are at the absolute peak of the game, and we have reached that threshold for several of the legends we have discussed without too many new faces. I mentioned earlier how there's no retirement tour for Destiny players to truly go on outside of getting a raid report to round numbers, and the lack of fireworks really makes it understandable to want to hold on to the now. People are growing up and have responsibilities that take precedence over Destiny. Peeking to the future, Xbox will eventually only be able to do serious runs during the summer when players have open schedules. PlayStation will. I think you'll get the idea soon.
There were 3 world records in the 22-minute range. Just 3. That's how much of a game changer IRB is. And as you can see in the corner, it has once again resulted in ungodly changes. But it's also starting to represent a large change in what Xbox record compositions will look like, because this is the final world record for the incomparable Atomic. While the man contains several very polarizing traits to him, he will acquire his 33rd career world record later this month, retiring as the most prolific raid runner in Destiny history. Although it should be noted that Tuzi is right behind him in that total. But less about the news of the state of Destiny, because it's officially time to see in first person the second-to-none Kingsfall ability of Tako. The IRB segment on display is just one that I showcased in the 2205 record, so we can skip straight to totems here. After watching one highlight really fast, when coming back with left 6 relic, Tako drops the relic to glitch slam it, but goes into his menu too fast, but has the time to realize his mistake, come out of his menu, still slam it before the right side relic is there. Even this guy's mistakes are better than anyone else's. Anyway, back to totems. After a late join from Pumpkin on Hunter, Tako revives him and gets the orb gen at War Priest platform. Once he is finished there, he goes down to the right side with the Fieri guy. More on you later, friend. War Priest has a minor change, with Tako using a 4th Horseman to help with bad luck, or bad aim in his case, both when it comes to enemy spawns with Aura. Golgroth is where our first issues come up on a couple minor things. Pump spawns really late compared not only to his teammates, but what is generally expected of hunters. Looking at the footage, he doesn't move for a bit here, so maybe he had to change exotic still. He also respawns a couple seconds after killing himself, showing poor menu movement. Anyway, it goes fine until Tako has to take Golgroth's gauge, which goes miss, 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 then gets Golgroth's gaze anyway. This just kinda happens sometimes, and a mediocre kill, followed by Tako, nearly dying in transition, will take us to Daughters. The first round is fine, with Tuzi getting a 45 run, but then we get to see Tako take a turn. 49 seconds remaining is one of the fastest Daughter run you will see this entire series. Its only blemish is Tako doesn't land close enough to get a melting point off, and backup melting Atomic is nowhere to be seen until well after Pumpkin has shot his Celestial. Marvelous waste of an elite run that was so fast that it offsets entirely this bad kill. When it comes to Oryx, once again, we see all the standards of past runs, but watching Tako run during Oryx is without question unnecessarily fast for this situation. Thumb skating from platform to platform will result in you getting to the front for the aura well ahead of schedule. But it's like Tako can only be excellent in what he does. He lands perfectly on the inside edge of each platform, as if every time he is torn a 49-second Daughters is the minimum he will allow. After we do all that, we have the first world record under 22 minutes. Though similarly to the 2205, there is room to go, and some stupid fixes needed. This team is set up well for the future, yet there will be some massive changes to Xbox runs in the future. Remember, this will be the last run that Atomic will be a part of, so we'll need to get another to take his spot. Of course, the newest player to Kingsfall record speeds the Fieri guy, has shown promise as a future runner. But in terms of Xbox's capable record contenders, that's really about it. This is something we'll run into later, so let's see how long the old guard stands. I would make a real argument that this is the least known record out of all of these to this point. Another no video one, as you suspected, with a complete lack of fanfare around it. But what should be noted here is the first appearance of the player, the God of Mice. We will do a short debrief on him with little else to discuss here. Mice is most known for being one of the greatest Crota players of all time, but also doubling, as for the time being, and for the near future, genuinely the right-hand man to Tako in Kingsfall. This is less of a danger to Tuzi, because Mice is very much his own player, and generally ranks higher all time than Tako, but when it comes to being able to do Hunter, IRB, and most all the roles in Kingsfall, Mice is not too far off of Tako. Mice aside, this record has no real legacy. Another miscellaneous improvements in execution, as we will later come to repeat a ton. As such, let's move to the more interesting record that takes place just 3 days later. This will be the final Kingsfall record for nearly 10 months, or once every Anthony Rendon highlight. Funny enough, it's actually the first we have of Twoozy's POV, who, yes, is still as good as ever. In sadder news, however, this will be the final time this video has the dynamic duo of DD and Twoozy. DD, with greater life goals, no longer has the ability to run as often as he wants to succeed in college. He hangs up the controller for good this time, leaving on top as the first ever sub 1 hour speed rank. When I introduced him into this series, I did so claiming he was likely one of the 5 greatest raiders of all time, and that he would often be in the shadow of players like Twoozy or zRear, his frequent running mates, not out of a lack of ability, but just because that's really how great this era of running is. Unlike the 2 runners ahead of him, DD was a much kinder and welcoming person, compared to the carefree, just put him on orb gen, I don't care, attitude of Twoozy or the British nature of Rear. If you showed interest in speedrunning at any level, and he saw an ounce of potential in you, Danger was such a great role model as a runner and a person. The game misses you greatly, man. I know it does. On the run itself, it's the same lane of runs shortly after a strat development, but players are so much better now that we are tearing those down much faster than we used to. Run breaks now happen because of a lack of top players in quantity, not quality. But let's head to the gameplay. Very standard things we are seeing now, featuring Twoozy splits, more on you later. Not pausing the timer during death screen, more on that later. Outstanding kills on Warpriest and Golgoroth, followed up by a solid transition through Transept, leads to a 10-second lead heading into Daughters. Note the timer is going on here. Again, that'll be important in the next video. Arriving at Daughters, we are treated to one of my favorite clips in the world record you'll ever find. After a respectable 46 run from Danger and a fast kill on Daughter, the relatively newcomer Fieri is now torn between dimensions. Twoozy darts off of plate 2 with zRear in half already on plate 1. Fieri also jumps to plate 2 to begin running. Fieri has arrived at the wrong plate. No small fix either, as he has run halfway across the map just to begin his running. He finishes with a 37, a loss of almost that entire lead they built up. And yet, after the second Daughter kill, they've somehow gained time. These splits compare to a personal best of 21:59 that Twoozy had, so it's just ahead of a marginally worse Daughters, and we can't exactly tell if it's record material by the finish. But zRear had a timer going next to him as well, and by the end, he correctly read high 30s final for Xbox's 24th of the 29 total Kingsfall records. I really hyped up the PlayStation versus Xbox concept in those early days a bit too soon, didn't I? Of course, Xbox was miles ahead on talent and had miles more talent coming ahead of them. But really is a disappointment that PlayStation never got that competing dynasty we had hoped for. But let's look back to the 23-19, when PlayStation showed up and accidentally took the world record at the tail end of 2 active Xbox dynasties. I said it would be about a year and a half until they would hold a record again. I also said that it's 10 months until the next record, so 10 months plus the 7 we have covered thus far equals... We are back and equipped with once again 0 overlapping players from any previous iteration of PlayStation Kingsfall record. I want to talk more about the run itself here, as opposed to the players that completed them, because that part will come shortly. Because once again, we have a new strat to announce. And yes, it's another powerhouse of a save. We need to look at what save exists and the encounters they take place in. So at Relics, we have Orb Gen, Part Glitch, and of course, IRB. Ships has the earliest form of sword flying, has Power Slide and all its variations, and the second half of IRB. Skipping over to War Priest, there are Shotgun Kills, Instant Start, and Instant Aura. Golgoroth has R2 and Blinding Bubbles. Daughters has nothing that truly speeds it up, but we'll come back to that. Oryx has Hunter Shade Kills and Slam Detonations. Basically, every encounter has multiple things players can do to finish it faster. Even Daughters to an extent, because of Celestial Melting Point, we can get from new mission to new mission far quicker than otherwise. But Totems has been completely time-locked from day one. We find things to do like Orb Gens for Hunters, but that's just biding time, not actually subtracting time off of the final run. Until now. I now present to you one of the most complex strats in all of Destiny. Aura Dupe is a minute of time save, and yet this record is a mere 5-second improvement over the record. So what went wrong? Everything, that's what went wrong. Removing the context of a legendary strategy being introduced, and this being the effective start of the modern era of Destiny, where record runners are more skilled than ever before, this may well be the worst world record in the history of Kingsfall. And we will assert that statement off of what happened in each encounter to Oryx, minus Totems. Relics was a 2:07, already more than a dozen seconds behind record. The gameplay, courtesy of Roaxic, who should have made top 100, does not contain any audio. But the whole time, they have been saying, don't worry, this is without Aura Dupe. We'll be fine. Before bleeding almost all of the advantage. More on that later. We'll skip RB, which was just fine on time because Roaxic was on the die roll, so we can just see if anything went stupid wrong. But in any case, we'll come back to Totems and now get to witness the disaster that is War Priest. We see a new variation of Orb Gen for Hunter by everyone popping a bubble as War Priest is spawning in. Once again, something used to this day. Roaxic managed to run out of primary ammo at War Priest, which isn't really even a problem I knew people could run into in King Speeds. So, I guess that's pretty neat. Arriving at DPS, Roaxic puts on the first melting and, oh god, oh no. Okay, he's getting back up and, oh no. This is hard to watch. That's the melting and a whole shotgun not where he needs to be. He still gets back up with a decent chunk of health remaining to finish presenting one of the worst War Priests of the last half-decade. Golgoroth wasn't exactly better with a pretty slow kill, and Transept mirrors those early redeem teams, with one mishap from Alex leading to him arriving late as hell to the end platform. And underwhelming Daughters treats us to the final example of atomic slander. Before Oryx slams down on plate 1, everyone places bubbles, with King 32 Slayer having gifted the Void on. This was a strat first theorized all the way back in 2020 by, believe it or not, Zermi. He told Atomic that small orbs wouldn't be an issue if everyone was generated an extreme number of them using the perk Gift of the Void to generate up to 6 orbs per bubble, double what our current output was. We wouldn't be sacrificing because no DPS encounters last long enough for bubbles to expire, and it's simply more super to go around. Atomic shot that idea down because it wouldn't work. Anyway, we're then treated to one of my favorite strat developments to Oryx, the 4264 detonations. If you don't shoot the ogres at all and detonate bombs, it will lead to ogres still leaving bombs as they die. So in an effort to get the fast mortars multiple times without doing an extra round of Oryx, a loss of a minute, we now intentionally only detonate 2 bombs on round 2 and instead detonate 6 in the third to get back on pace. I would argue that because of this specific addition to Oryx and a solid shade kill from Alex, this was the difference of a run being record or not. And to finalize this legendary run in which a new generation of PlayStation players have entered the fray, we don't even see Oryx die because Roaxic's controller died. I suppose that's the only way this record could have ended. And after all that poor play outside of Oryx that was rewarded with a record, it's time to talk about Aura Dupe. This is a strategy that we will see some changes as time progresses, but for now, it is remembered as a strategy that works maybe 30% of the time if you can get that connection-based RNG to work, but if you can, it's a minute plus save. What happens is a player breaches ahead to War Priest and sword swipes into a rock right next to the joining allies barrier to have a chance of picking up another aura. From there, both sides are 2-manning while a third 2-man sits on the stairs by spawn, clearing out enemies. The depositing of Deathsinger's power from the middle people count, and because of it, removes multiple cycles of the 30-second wait to get more Deathsingers, allowing the worst budget run of the 2020s to be a world record.
For the first time in the history of Destiny, PlayStation is for real. Back-to-back records with the same exact team. No year-long hiatus to sneak one in on Xbox, no fluke run that happened to be record off of new strats alone. And for the very first time in this documentation of King's Fall history, a PlayStation player worthy of the title of King's Fall Legend. Now would be a fitting time to introduce one of my favorite humans in the known universe, King 32 Slayer. King 32 Slayer is playing to this day as one of the best King's Fall players on this earth, was the most important cog to the development of Oradupe, and has at least 15 King's Fall records. While only a 9 out of 10 at Relics, he is seriously one of the most consistent back 9 raiders this game has seen. This one will be his second record, and while there is a video, this record is merely a less bad version of the previous record, so I will choose to spend this time talking not just about the King, but all the players involved, and it would be a crime of me not to immediately pivot over to Alex. I had a serious debate as to if Alex should have this character spot, but as of the writing of this, King has just one more King's Fall record than Alex, so I'm going with what's more topical for the video. Though Alex and King really share more of that Tako and zRear or Twoozy dynamic, where one is simply the best KF player on his console, and the other is a much more well-rounded record runner, Alex will have his career peak in 2024 when he gets all 4 main category records, the first time anyone will do that since Atomic and Kylo back in the summer 2020. Boots Electrics will take part in that journey. While he mostly does orb gen and a handful of the carrier roles, he is a very talented runner who assisted in the creation of this project. Jugger is high as fuck all the time, and YouLoved is the first person to do IRB in a world record other than Tako. And while he was never spectacular at them, it is nonetheless the most important job that one can be on for the first encounters in King's Fall. Lastly is Roaxic. He is the only member of the group who didn't make the Raiding Hall of Fame, but is definitely up there in ability. This core of players will change over time, but for the most part they will stick together as the team of PlayStation, not just in the present or in the future of runs, but the best PlayStation players of all time. And with this team and this time, we now have to see how Xbox responds to this outbreak on their hands. Xbox is the historical big brother in King's Fall, remember? Now they've been hit twice by a team who no longer looking up at the runners of today. Show me what you have got.
Good news and bad news for you, dear viewer. This record, as we have said so many times, has no video footage. And the good news is that of the current record, this is one of the last times we will run into this problem. And again, we have sneakily reached another minute barrier thanks to the contributions of PlayStation, and we are finally seeing that next generation of runners step up to handle the spotlight. Of course, Rear and Tako are still kings of the category. Sekuo is one many of you would recognize as a person who hosted the King's Fall segment of our Top 100, but those in the speedrunning circles know as the man who would be Xbox's best orb genner for a decent period of time. This was his world record debut after a relatively short build-up that came in large part to Tako, who is again still ahead of the pack. A new face to King's Fall, but not new to Destiny speedrunning, Atromix is a 2020 veteran of mostly Wrath of the Machine and Crota's End. He didn't have too many special things to do in King's Fall, and lastly, we have units. To those who don't know much about Clay the player, let's ask the community at the time for their thoughts. Thank you for your input. There is generally less to discuss about runs themselves. We have only a handful of stat changes remaining before we catch up to what current record strats are, so most improvements to the record come off of execution. We will have to move it to the narratives forming on each console to keep what we hope is entertaining content going. Besides, I already told you this is one of the final records without video, so let's see how exactly this group works.
We will glance at the footage for this record to at least see where the improvements are being made, but the important things with this run and the future of the Xbox runs are after the analysis. IRB is being performed by Fieri instead of the usual Tako, because Tako was still outperforming Mice overall, But with mice just behind him in production, we decided, what's better than one hunter? How about another? As we have been documenting this record history, one of the things we keep is the majority team composition for mostly what people were running in the early days, when it was only a few titans and even warlocks. For years now, it's been unchanged, with 90% of the raid being run with one hunter and 5 titans. Though now with slightly different super management, we find ourselves having an extra bubble by Golgoroth, so we can instead have someone be a hunter for celestial damage and better daughter kills. Since movement on hunters is now optimized to compete with titans in transition, it makes sense. And I mean, of course it makes sense. They got record, didn't they? Though I do find it funny that in 24 hours they managed to not only get another world record, but disrupt one of the only consistent pieces of speedrunning philosophy we've maintained for years. Yeah, one day later. Remember when that was a somewhat normal occurrence? Records lasting days at a time while Cruelty and Tfue were hooping on PlayStation runners without a competition in sight? I don't want to sound like a back in my day kind of person. I really love the new strategies. We are in a much deteriorated version of Destiny at this point. There were millions of active players in 2016, but the case in 2022 is stragglers who can't abandon the game they loved and aren't interested in the day job of Destiny 2. It's a much more tight-knit community, and that community has been absolutely hacking down the King's Fall world record with 2 massive strats that we haven't been able to master yet to this point. Though I'm sure Tako is about as close as you can get, using this minute barrier break to truly get noticed as an all-time great of a player. While the roster he does it with is just a slight retool, switching the unreliable units for the stalwart Fieri, it's mostly notable because this will be the final time zRear gets to place his signature in the history books. The greatest raider of all time retires as a 9-time King's Fall world record holder and an all-timer in what he did. With him leaving and legends like Tuzi and Danger out of the light for multiple records, I think it's time to look forward to the next generation of Xbox players. Perhaps part of that next wave will be Sekiwo. He's promising in all raids, but at least in King's Fall is rarely let off the carry rolls in record attempts, and outside of him it's, well, nobody. Xbox will still hold King's Fall record many times and set legendary times, but there won't be any more champions for us to latch onto. We will only be introducing one new record holder to the console. When it comes to the future of raiding, not just in King's Fall, but in all of Destiny, we have to look at PlayStation. PlayStation is back, and again, the same core is here again, beating Xbox. This was what really set this PlayStation core apart from their counterparts. Even though Camhammer's group was doing well in the other raids, and only months after this would set the greatest Wrath record of all time, this was still what forced Xbox to perhaps not stop looking down on the console, but at the very least put PlayStation more on notice to the stars on Xbox. There are less innovations this time because they didn't need to create strats to compete with Xbox this time around. They were just using what they had already correctly determined were the best strats to use and could now afford to use their time to practice and simply improve at the raid, now catching up to Xbox in talent. But if you know what comes down the line here, they'll do more than just catch up. This run is just taking more advantage of the save available in Oradupe, so I mostly want to skip along with this record, so let's just skim through it. Alright, relics, good dupe hit, more priests, go. What? Did I just see 3 people miss a breach in perfect sync? No, this time is ass, let's get moving. This time featuring 2 more legendary players who are known for their Wrath ability. PlayStation has for the second time this chapter set consecutive records in a raid that had been completely dominated by Xbox for so many years. Though they don't appear for the remainder of this series, we will still use this record of micro improvements and one important strategy development to discuss Frankie and Synergy. Frankie and Synergy are the same coin as far as both players and people go. Both Wrath players, both obnoxious personalities, both unbelievable talents when it comes to the game of Destiny. Frankie and Synergy would replace Alex and Boots in this record. Boots' most notable position here was only orb generation, which while important, could easily be filled by a competitively average King's Fall player like Synergy. But he had the mechanical skill demanding of being arguably the best Wrath player in the world. The reason I say arguably is because of Frankie, who had the tall order of filling in for Alex, but he really took over Roaxic's roles while Roaxic moved on to Hunter for the run. All of this shows that this core of players is flexible, interchangeable, and incredibly talented all throughout. Their innovation came back with a new method to desyncing for aura duplication. By intentionally failing a breach just before the Portico load zone, typically only used for IRB death, you can sword swipe into it just before the wipe screen moves the team to totems, and you could start totems desynced instead of having to use the start to get the desync. With the resync process being the same, it became the primary method for its extreme consistency compared to the old version, and for making it a time save by getting an extra cycle done. Though for having another cycle and speeding up totems even more, you'd think it'd be more than a 5-second improvement. Well, here's the full potential of this core unleashed. Remarkably, impossibly, even inconceivably, we are approaching not just a minute barrier, but a 10-minute barrier. We have technically only seen this twice before, when the second ever speedrun was completed, setting the record under 40 minutes for the first time, and later in Chapter 1, when the 6th record happened by the Note team, bringing the record under half an hour. Since then, we have seen 35 total world records, 7 years of player and strategy development, the entire King's Fall careers of almost every top 10 raider of all time both begin and conclude. PlayStation has not just gathered a team that competes with Xbox, but it's just 3 repeated record titles amidst a somewhat retool of the talent on Xbox. Just 10 seconds away from taking the record under 20 minutes and earning what is very likely the most groundbreaking and legendary achievement in the history of this raid, King, Alex, and the rest of 4 Auras are now the frontrunners to achieve such a feat. As PlayStation's quick rise to the top was transpiring, Xbox has added 1 top player, squeaked out 2 records to better execution of the strategies that PlayStation had brought to the table, and sat back as they quickly grabbed the wheel to take this record sub 20. Now yes, this record is most notable for being the precipice of history, but it's also the best record they've set to date. Now that being said, it's a tale of two halves for the most part. A spotless first half gives them a massive lead over the current record, but starting at Jugger messing up his Golgoroth slide transition and Roraxic bricking out his rollout to the Swordfly, it somewhat falls apart. They lose about 2 seconds from a bad transept, lost 2 more seconds from a rare King mistake at Oryx being unable to instantly take out his Knight, lost approximately 6 more seconds to incredibly sloppy detonations, something we will revisit again. Those totals just in the second half bring the potential of this very run to sub 20. You can even point out how you loved saying they were on pace for not just record through IRB, but they were in sub 20 territory. Of course, he was just calling out how the warp was 3 minutes and 20 seconds into the raid, but I prefer the karma approach to it all. But this was a missed opportunity from PlayStation. Luckily for them, they still have the best record A team in the world, and the best substitutions for that team. They have the advantage of more time practicing the modern strats compared to Xbox. However, this record history is still missing something crucial. Something that all other records have seen in their histories. An all-time carry job. As of this point in history, Robski's performance in the 648 Crota's End world record was one of the most dominant individual efforts across any raid. As the best Vault of Glass player in the world, K Shiflet would have a dominating performance on the world's first sub-14 VOG, both of which fall short to the unreal carrying that Raj had as the man who did every single hard job in the 1356 Wrath of the Machine record. Each of those performances are exceptional stories involving extraordinary players, in record histories that have their own stories to tell, but less so in King's Fall in this department. Yes, there were stretches of individual dominance, like Tuzi setting 9 consecutive King's Fall records, Tifu and Cruelty each monopolizing the raid in their redeem stints. At least since PlayStation's takeover, we've really neglected to mention Tako in this stretch. Yes, he's regarded as the best King's Fall player in the world, and he's still been on Xbox, but the stories Xbox has told in this time have changed in that time. There's been new faces like Mice and Sekuo entering the scene. Rear has ascended to GOAT status in raiding, taking that very title from his running mate Tuzi, I believe. Tako simply being the greatest King's Fall player isn't news at this point, and a much less interesting narrative about him. We root for underdogs as people. It's what makes entertainment entertaining. It's why we rooted for the Cavaliers to beat the Warriors even one time in the late 2010s. It's why we hoped the Falcons could topple the evil empire in New England that same year, and what made the Giants doing it twice so special. We internalized that America, the most dominant empire in the history of mankind, were the greatest underdogs of all time when they beat the USSR hockey team in 1980. We want Captain America to prevail as he stares down Thanos' army. And now with PlayStation bearing down on an achievement the likes of which Destiny never really thought it would see, Tako stared down the odds and completely took over. After all this time, it's finally happened. The legendary 10-minute barrier break, done not by PlayStation, but by Xbox. In an upset, the greatest King's Fall player ever to be born has caused a canon event. No matter what happens in the rest of the series, no matter what legacies are formed through King's Fall, no matter who else steps up to the mantle, we will forever look back on this record as the pinnacle of the raid. As of the run itself, it was pretty clean for what Xbox does until a slow first auto kill happened, but a spotless Oryx allows mistakes to be minimal and the saves developed by PlayStation to be used to perfection. However, the physical run itself isn't what matters here. The superstar of superstars, a man who would hold 3 out of the 4 world records, was on top of the world. People who enjoy sports competition in the way I do are tripping over themselves. We love seeing the great players do great things, making great plays, seeing their fantasy endings come true. It's so beautiful to see these take place, not just because it's Destiny history that we've seen, but because the dynamics between the world-class athletes and that of world-class Destiny players are much different. Figures like Michael Jordan or Tom Brady are beings that don't seem real to us mortals. Go back and watch the 1992 Olympics and you will find countless times where people are reaching out just to say that they touched the greatest basketball player of all time. The super athletes are people of great power and agency compared to Destiny players who are often scraping by in terms of fame and fortune like most others. Makes them feel more relatable. Relatable not only in stature, but the fact that they are guys in their late teens and 20s who decided that Destiny 2 really wasn't the game for them and stayed on to what drew them in to begin with. These are our friends and comrades at the top of the game. Players like Tako deserve incredible praise not only for being a phenomenal player, but also a phenomenal character. So often people get to the top and begin to treat those beneath them with less and less respect. We talked about that when it came to Atomic and how fringe record contenders would find themselves out of the top running scene faster than they deserved because he had facilitated a complex that he and he alone was the ultimate authority on Destiny strats and fire teams. Tako is a great and versatile player who's respectful of others and isn't afraid to run raids built of raiders who won't be getting records in their time on the game. Even if they don't know it, he's helped hundreds of people on this journey to becoming the best, and he hasn't forgotten who provided each rung on that ladder. If this story leaves you with anything, I want you to remember Tako for the man he is above all else. Hope you like seeing times that start with a 1. We will never leave this range.